Welcome to our continuing series, Fine Poetry, Poems that Touch Deeper Chords. Today, Jorge Luis Borges, 1899 to 1986, Part 1. We begin with Sri Aurobindo on translations. He writes, "A translator is not necessarily bound to the exact word and letter of the original he chooses. He can make his own poem out of it if he likes, and that is what is very often done. This is all the more legitimate since we find that literal translations more completely betray than those that are reasonably free, turning life into death and poetic power into poverty and flatness. It is not many who can carry over the spirit of a poem, the characteristic power of its expression, and the turn of its rhythmical movement from one language to another, especially when the tongues in question are so alien in temperament to each other as English and Bengali. When that can be done, there is the perfect translation. There is no question of defective poetry or lines. There are two ways of rendering a poem from one language into another. One is to keep strictly to the manner and turn of the original, the other to take its spirit, sense, and imagery and reproduce them freely so as to suit the new language. Many of the translations of Borges poems in Jorge Luis Borges selected poems, edited by Alexander Coleman, are superb and should be read by all who love poetry, not only for the beauty of his poetry, but these words by Borges have inspired me to include a selection of his poems in translation in the series Fine Poetry. After all these years, I have observed that beauty, like happiness, is frequent. A day does not pass when we are not for an instant in paradise. There is no poet, however mediocre, who has not written the best line in literature, but also the most miserable ones. Beauty is not a privilege of a few illustrious names. It would be rare if this book did not contain one single line of staying with you to the end. The first poem, Things That Might Have Been. I think of things that weren't, but might have been. The treatise on Saxon myths Bede never wrote. The inconceivable work Dante might have had a glimpse of as soon as he'd corrected the comedy's last verse. History without the afternoons of the cross and the hemlock. History without the face of Helen. Man without the eyes that gave us the moon. On Gettysburg's 3 days, victory for the South. The love we never shared. The wide empire the Vikings chose not to found. The world without the wheel or the rose, the view John Donne held of Shakespeare, the other horn of the unicorn, the fabled Irish bird that lights on 2 trees at once, the child I never had. The moon, there is such solitude in that gold. The moon of these nights is not the moon the first Adam saw. Long centuries of human vigil have filled her with an old lament. See, she is your mirror. Remorse. I have committed the worst of sins one can commit. I have not been happy. Let the glaciers of oblivion take and engulf me mercilessly. My parents bore me for the risky and the beautiful game of life, for earth, water, air, and fire. I failed them. I was not happy. Their youthful hope for me unfulfilled. I applied my mind to the symmetric arguments of art, its web of trivia. They willed me bravery. I was not brave. It never leaves me, always at my side, that shadow of a melancholy man. A Rose and Milton. From the generations of roses that are lost in the depths of time, I want one saved from oblivion, one spotless rose of all things that ever were. Fate permits me the gift of choosing for once that silent flower, the last rose that Milton held before him, unseen. O vermilion, or yellow, or white rose of a ruined garden, your past still magically remains, forever shines in these verses. Gold, blood, ivory or shadow, as if in his hands, invisible rose. To the Nightingale, on what secret night in England, or by the incalculable constant Rhine, lost among all the nights of my nights, carried to my unknowing ear your voice, burdened with mythology, Nightingale, a virgin of the Persians? Perhaps I never heard you, yet my life I bound to your life inseparably. A wandering spirit is your symbol in a book of enigmas. El Marino named you the siren of the woods, and you sing through Juliet's night, and in the intricate Latin pages, and from the pine trees of that other Nightingale of Germany and Judea, Heine, mocking, burning, mourning. Keats heard you for all, everywhere. There's not one of the bright names the people of the earth have given you that does not yearn to match your music. Nightingale of shadows. The Muslim dreamed you drunk with ecstasy, his breast transpierced by the thorn of the sung rose that you redden with your last blood. Assiduously, I plot these lines in twilight emptiness, nightingale of the shores and seas, who in exultation, memory and fable burn with love and die melodiously. Blake. Where will the rose in your hand exist that lavishes, without knowing, intimate gifts? Not in color, because the flower is blind, nor in the sweet, inexhaustible fragrance, nor in the weight of the petal. Those things are sparse and remote echoes. The real rose is more elusive. Perhaps a pillar, or a battle, or a firmament of angels, or an infinite world, secret and necessary, or the joy of a God we will not see, or a silver planet in another sky, or a terrible archetype lacking the form of the rose. And again by Borges, a patio. At evening they grow weary, the patio's 2 or 3 colors. Tonight the moon, bright circle, fails to dominate space. Patio, channel of sky. The patio is the slope down which sky flows into the house. Serene, eternity waits at the crossroad of stars. It is pleasant to live in the friendly dark of entranceway, arbor, and cistern. And the last poem. Simplicity. It opens the gate to the garden with the docility of a page that frequent devotion questions. And inside, my gaze has no need to fix on objects that already exist, exact, in memory. I know the customs and souls and that dialect of illusions that every human gathering goes weaving. I've no need to speak, nor claim false privilege. They know me well who surround me here, know well my afflictions and weakness. This is to reach the highest thing that heaven perhaps will grant us. Not admiration or victory, but simply to be accepted as part of an undeniable reality, like stones and trees.